I'm Rebecca, a high school teacher in a Texas suburb, the younger sister who's always bailed out my family's endless crises. At Christmas, during our family dinner, my sister's daughter looked at my present and said, "Mom says you always buy cheap stuff." Everyone laughed. I smiled. That night, I made a choice that would turn their world upside down. By 7:21 a.m., my sister's husband was blowing up my phone. Some moments hit you hard and don't let go. That Christmas evening, I sat at my sister's table, dessert cleared, watching my niece open the gifts I'd spent weeks choosing. A set of books she'd raved about, concert tickets for her favorite artist, a custom hoodie I'd tracked down. They weren't cheap, but with a quick smirk, she said it. Like it was nothing. "Mom says you always buy cheap stuff anyway." The room burst into laughter. I gripped my coffee mug, waiting for someone to step in. But my sister just grinned. Her husband chuckled, and my niece scrolled her phone. Unbothered, I stayed calm, nodded, but inside, it burned. I didn't mention the $500 I'd sent for their AC repair last summer, or the camp fees for my niece when they were short. I'd been their lifeline, not their equal. Those cheap gifts cost me $300 for her alone, with extras for my sister and her husband. I'd dropped over $800, only to be mocked. That night, I opened my laptop, logged into the joint bank account I'd co-signed years ago. Bad credit, job losses, excuses I'd believed. It was for emergencies. But those never stopped. At 1:15 a.m., I did something final. No going back. "Tell me where you're from. I want to know how far my story will spread." The morning after Christmas arrived sooner than expected. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand, pulling me from a restless sleep. It was my sister's husband, Daniel. His name flashing on the screen at 7:21 a.m. I let it ring, staring at the ceiling as the vibrations echoed in the quiet room. Then came the texts, one after another, sharp demands that the account wasn't working, that I needed to fix it immediately before they were embarrassed at the grocery line. I didn't respond. Instead, I lay there, the weight of the previous evening settling heavier. Soon, messages from my sister Amanda poured in, her words laced with accusation. She dismissed the whole thing as a child's harmless joke, claiming I was overreacting to something said in jest by a 12-year-old who didn't know better. The screen lit up with her insistence that I was being dramatic, that family didn't hold grudges over such trivial matters. But as I scrolled through the notifications without replying, fragments of the past year surfaced in my mind. I'd transferred $500 last spring when their water bill piled up from a leaky pipe they couldn't afford to repair. Then there was the summer camp for my niece Sophia, another expense they'd begged me to cover because work was slow and funds were tight. And the gifts from yesterday, close to $800 in total, had been my latest attempt to show care, only to be met with ridicule. I silenced the phone, setting it face down on the table. In that moment, a quiet resolve formed. I'd been treated like a convenient ATM for too long, my generosity taken for granted without a shred of appreciation or respect in return. If this kind of family drama makes you reflect on your own relationships, give it a like to share the vibe. By noon, Amanda's calls ramped up, the device vibrating nonstop as if urgency could force my hand. Her texts shifted tone, turning desperate with pleas about how family was supposed to support each other through tough times, how I was loaded compared to them and should understand their struggles. She wove in guilt, mentioning Sophia's needs and how a simple fix could make everything right again. I read them all but felt no pull to engage. The clarity from the night before held firm. I wasn't angry anymore, just done with the one-sided dynamic. Finally, I typed a brief reply. I was reviewing my finances for the new year, and the account would remain frozen. No explanations, no promises, just that. The silence after my message lasted only minutes before more notifications flooded in, but I ignored them too. For years, I'd adjusted my budget around their crises, dipping into savings for rent shortfalls or unexpected car fixes. Last year alone, I'd covered 3 partial rent payments when Amanda's retail job hours were cut, and I'd sponsored Sophia's extracurriculars without a second thought. Yet here they were, framing me as the villain for drawing a line. As the afternoon wore on, the barrage continued, mixes of confusion, then frustration, peppered with half-hearted apologies that rang hollow. Daniel jumped back in with texts about how this was petty, how I should think of the kid caught in the middle. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was the realization that my role had been reduced to a financial crutch. My efforts mocked while they leaned harder. I stepped away from the phone entirely, brewing coffee in my small kitchen, the aroma filling the space as I pondered the shift. No more late-night transfers or quick fixes for their oversights. The pattern was clear now: emergencies that weren't mine to solve, gratitude that never materialized. For the first time, I felt the burden lifting, even as their messages piled up unread. The guilt trips escalated in the texts I glimpsed later, accusations that I was punishing an innocent child, that my success made me oblivious to their daily grind. Amanda even referenced old family stories, twisting them to paint me as the one who'd always had it easier, but those attempts fell flat. I'd seen through the manipulation, the way they positioned themselves as victims before acknowledging any fault. By evening, the intensity had waned slightly, but the undercurrent remained. I didn't waver. This wasn't revenge, it was recalibration, a step toward reclaiming my own stability after years of propping up theirs. The phone finally quieted, leaving me in peace to reflect on how long I'd enabled the imbalance. Late that afternoon, a knock echoed through my door. I opened it to find Amanda standing there, her face drawn with exhaustion, eyes shadowed from lack of rest. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her coat still buttoned against the Texas chill, and collapsed onto the couch like the weight of the day had finally caught up. We exchanged a few words about the holiday rush, how the season always seemed to pile on more stress than joy, with shopping lists and gatherings stretching budgets thin, but it didn't take long for her to pivot, her voice softening into a plea about the frozen account. Bills were stacking up, she said. Groceries needed buying, and a quick unfreeze would sort everything out without dragging it further. I listened, arms crossed, the silence between us growing thicker. Then I asked the question that had been building inside me for years. What had she done for me in the last 5 years? The words hung there, direct and unflinching, forcing her to confront the imbalance head-on. Amanda shifted uncomfortably, mumbling about emotional support during my tougher times, how she'd been there to listen when work got overwhelming or life felt isolating, but her response felt thin, a deflection rather than an answer, and I could see the hesitation in her eyes as she searched for more to say. I didn't let it slide. Instead, I laid it out plainly, recalling the 3 times I'd covered part of their rent last year alone when job instability hit hard. There were the clothes for Sophia's school year, the birthday surprises that went beyond modest, and the miscellaneous bills that added up without acknowledgement. In total, my spreadsheet tracked it to $6,800, patterns I documented as a habit from my teaching days, where details mattered in lesson plans and evaluations. She absorbed the list, her expression tightening, but instead of reflection, she turned it back on me. Accusations flew about my selfishness, how I had no kids to raise and thus no real grasp on their daily pressures, how my stable job as a teacher made me detached from their reality of scraping by. The words stung, echoing old family dynamics where my choices were framed as easier paths. But I held steady, refusing to absorb the blame. This wasn't about anger or pettiness, it was a long overdue recognition of how I'd been positioned as the perpetual fixer, my contributions expected yet undervalued. Amanda pressed on, her tone mixing frustration with a hint of desperation, suggesting that family bonds meant overlooking slights and stepping up regardless. She brought up shared childhood memories, attempting to weave nostalgia into guilt, but it fell flat against the clarity I'd gained. I countered calmly, pointing out that emotional support rang hollow when it came paired with entitlement, when my help was solicited but never reciprocated in any meaningful way. The conversation circled, her defenses rising as I dismantled the excuses, highlighting instances where their crises had pulled from my savings without a plan for repayment or even thanks. As the light faded outside my suburb window, the tension peaked. Amanda leaned forward, her plea intensifying about the immediate needs, the utilities on the brink, the pantry running low, but I remained unmoved, the decision solidifying within me. Finally, I said it. The words deliberate and final. I was done being their backup plan, and they wouldn't get another dime from me. Ever. The statement landed like a barrier, shifting the air in the room. Her reaction a mix of shock and denial as she processed the boundary I'd just drawn. She tried to pivot again, framing it as punishment for a single misstep, but I redirected, emphasizing that this was the culmination of years, not one evening. The exchange grew strained, her voice rising slightly in protest. But I kept my composure, reiterating the facts without escalation. In that moment, facing her across the living room, I felt the shift deepen, a release from the invisible obligations that had defined our relationship. Amanda's pleas tapered off, replaced by a sullen quiet, as if the reality of my stance began to sink in. The visit stretched on, her attempts to circle back to negotiation fading under my resolve. I didn't offer alternatives or soften the edges. This was the line, clear and non-negotiable, born from exhaustion with the one-way street our sibling bond had become. As she gathered her things to leave, the silence spoke volumes, her departure marked by a heavy sigh rather than resolution. I closed the door behind her, the click echoing in the empty hall, a punctuation to the confrontation that had been brewing far too long. That evening, my phone rang with a familiar tone. It was my mom, Linda, her voice laced with that understated worry she often used when sensing rifts, asking about my well-being post-celebrations. She referenced the palpable strain circulating among us, likely gleaned from brief exchanges, and proposed exploring solutions to mend it, her suggestion wrapped in optimism but tempered by awareness. I proceeded without reservation, detailing the dinner incident, the niece's offhand critique of the presents as inexpensive, the ensuing mirth that rang unchecked, and the void of intervention, amplifying my vulnerability amid kin. I delved into the recurring theme of my assistance, spanning urgent transfers to supplementary aids, consistently offered yet seldom valued as voluntary. Linda held her tongue throughout, her measured breaths indicating absorption of the narrative. Upon completion, she lingered in quiet contemplation, then posed a query regarding the aggregate financial outlay over the interval, aiming to quantify the extent. I consulted my electronic record, a practice borrowed from managing educational metrics, where figures narrated tales of disparity. $6,800 across the year. I conveyed incorporating housing subsidies, instructional investments, garment acquisitions, and festal enhancements, each entry underscoring the unidirectional nature. Her feedback arrived unadorned but impactful. It fell outside my purview to bear that, and it always had. The affirmation struck a chord, alleviating an unspoken strain, as though her utterance authorized the shedding of an inherited mantle. Before long, my dad Thomas connected, his manner forthright, foregoing preliminaries to articulate his discontent not toward me, but concerning Amanda's dependence on her junior kin for fundamental sustenance, a configuration ill-suited for mature individuals with personal duties. He disclosed a candid dialogue he'd initiated with her, highlighting the inappropriateness of such expectation while diminishing the provider. Conjointly, they elected to refrain from any intervention, no provisional advances or surrogate supports, obliging Amanda to address her predicaments autonomously. This shared resolution bolstered my position, converting solitude into coalition. As the interactions wrapped, I wandered my compact residence, the dialogues resonating like aftershocks in the still environment. For extended periods, I'd internalized the obligation, justifying it as fraternal allegiance amidst their variable circumstances. Presently, with their sanction, the paradigm transformed, endorsing the imperative of demarcations. I contemplated the kinship strands, how they'd entwined progressively into entanglements of anticipation, wherein my inputs turned foundational rather than extraordinary. Linda's compassion harmonized with Thomas's frankness, both elucidating roots I disregarded in my endeavors to preserve cohesion. The discourses incited self-examination on interpersonal fairness, how asymmetries corrode when ignored, undermining connections intended to elevate. Their determination to eschew facilitation signified a crucial recalibration, synchronizing with my nascent posture. Empowerment welled as I weighed the ramifications, no longer traversing the landscape unaccompanied but with generational insight reinforcing the redefinition of thresholds. The clan's architecture was mutating, unveiling crevices protractedly masked by customary benevolence. Gearing up for repose, serenity materialized, a nuanced alteration succeeding the day's rigors. Their declination to mediate with Amanda cemented the structure, instituting a unified rejoinder to ingrained customs. The affirmation from Linda lingered, her phrase echoing as a mantra against self-doubt, reminding me that roles in family aren't fixed but adaptable. Thomas's directness added weight, his words cutting through excuses to the core of accountability. I considered past holidays, how similar patterns had played out subtly. my contributions blending into the background while their needs took center stage. This time, the revelation brought liberation, a break from the cycle that had defined interactions. Their united front against aiding Amanda shifted the dynamics, placing responsibility where it belonged and freeing me from the mediator's burden. The evening's revelations fostered a sense of alignment, bridging generational gaps in understanding. As night deepened, I felt the transformation take root, the conversations serving as catalysts for change. The family's evolving narrative promised growth, even if through discomfort, highlighting the value of mutual respect over unilateral sacrifice. With their backing, the path forward appeared less daunting, empowered by collective recognition of the imbalance. The dialogues underscored a fundamental truth: true kinship thrives on equity, not exploitation. If insights on family limits strike a chord, subscribe for similar narratives that unpack these dynamics. Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor. A tentative knock sounded at my door, pulling me from my coffee routine. I opened it to see Sophia standing there, her small suitcase at her feet, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking up with a mix of uncertainty and routine familiarity. I froze for a moment, processing the sight of my niece unannounced on my porch. No car lingering at the curb to suggest a quick drop-off. She explained in her straightforward way that her mom had left her there, instructing her to remain until I offered an apology for the recent tensions. The surprise hit me like a cold wave, but I ushered her inside, masking my bewilderment with a welcoming gesture. I prepared breakfast, simple eggs and toast to fill the awkward air, watching as she settled at the kitchen table, her demeanor shifting from hesitant to casual as she pulled out her phone. Over the meal, Sophia opened up about school happenings, recounting classroom anecdotes and the latest trends on TikTok that captivated her peers, her voice animated in a way that eased the initial strain. The conversation flowed lightly, bridging the gap created by the adults' conflicts. Later, as we cleared the plates, she broached the subject of the Christmas gathering, questioning if I still harbored resentment from that night. I responded thoughtfully, conveying that the issue lay not in lingering anger but in the harm of echoing unkind remarks without correction. How such words could wound deeply even if unintended. Sophia nodded, absorbing my explanation, then shared a revelation that caught me off guard. Her mother had described my gifts as sourced from bargain outlets, implying they were chosen more for show than genuine intent. The admission stung, revealing layers of disparagement I'd suspected but not confirmed. I processed this internally, recognizing the tactic as an extension of the manipulation I'd encountered before, where my actions were reframed to undermine their value. The day progressed with Sophia engaging in familiar activities, drawing or browsing apps, while I navigated the unease of this imposed arrangement. As evening approached, a text from Amanda arrived, its content laced with calculated pressure, suggesting that hosting Sophia should illuminate the inequity of my stance and prompt reconsideration. The message reinforced my suspicions of orchestration, using the child as leverage in our dispute. I chose not to engage directly, instead focusing on the present moment with Sophia, ensuring her comfort amid the adult discord. The ploy highlighted a deeper strategy, one that prioritized coercion over accountability. The following morning, an email from the school counselor landed in my inbox, its subject line flagging concerns over guardianship arrangements for Sophia. The message detailed hints from Amanda that I might assume responsibilities for daily logistics like pickups and forms, seeking verification of any formal shifts. The implication jarred me, a bold escalation implying a transfer of duties without consultation, positioning me as a default caretaker in official eyes. I replied promptly, clarifying no such agreements existed, and outlined the true context of the situation to dispel the misinformation in recounting the facts to the counselor. I emphasized the absence of any guardianship intent, detailing the manipulative backdrop without exaggeration. The exchange underscored the lengths to which boundaries were being tested, prompting me to document it for future reference. As the correspondence concluded, a sense of vigilance settled in, aware that this move represented a new frontier in the ongoing friction. Sophia remained oblivious to the undercurrents, her presence a reminder of the innocents caught in the crossfire. I reflected on the day's developments, how the uninvited stay exposed vulnerabilities in family ties, where reliance morphed into presumption. The counselor's inquiry added an official dimension, necessitating clear assertions to prevent further entanglement. The episode prompted deeper consideration of protective measures, ensuring my responses remained measured yet firm against such intrusions. Sophia's revelations and the email combined to paint a picture of calculated efforts to regain control. Navigating the weekend with her, I balanced normalcy with introspection, observing how her candid shares illuminated parental influences. The manipulation via text and school contact revealed a pattern of indirect pressure, challenging my resolve but strengthening it. By day's end, the weight of these tactics clarified my path, reinforcing the need for distance from such dynamics. The counselor's prompt response affirmed the importance of transparency in countering misrepresentations. The experience with Sophia humanized the conflict, her unfiltered insights offering glimpses into the home environment I'd supported from afar. Yet it also highlighted the risks of involvement, where goodwill could be twisted into obligation. As I prepared for the next steps, the event solidified my commitment to self-preservation, viewing the guardianship hint as a wake-up to potential escalations. The weekend unfolded with these revelations at its core, shaping my understanding of the boundaries ahead. A few days later, an email notification pinged in my inbox. It was from Daniel, the subject line dramatic and self-righteous, setting the tone for what followed. I opened it, scanning the paragraphs that poured out indignation over my actions, framing them as an overblown response to what he labeled a trivial quip from a child unaware of its impact. He elaborated on the challenges of parenting in this economy, painting a picture of constant strain from rising costs and unpredictable income, as if that justified the entitlement. Near the end, the request slipped in $1,500 for immediate rent and grocery needs, positioned as a temporary bridge rather than a handout. The message lacked any genuine remorse, filled instead with complaints about my sudden change, how it disrupted their routine without warning. I read it twice, noting the absence of accountability, the way it shifted blame outward while demanding more. Have you dealt with this type of emotional leverage? Drop a comment below to spark the conversation. I forwarded the email to Linda and Thomas without hesitation, attaching a brief note for context. Their responses came swiftly, confirming their stance: no financial involvement from their side. A decision they reiterated to maintain consistency in addressing the issue. Amanda's text arrived shortly after, concise and pointed, accusing me of having proven my position at the expense of a child's well-being, labeling it unnecessarily harsh. The words aimed to evoke sympathy, but they glanced off me, failing to pierce the armor I'd built. I chose to disregard it entirely, deleting the notification without a reply, the act bringing a subtle lift to my spirit. For the first time in memory, my days unfolded without the shadow of impending crises. No urgent pleas disrupting my routine or pulling at my resources. The quiet extended, allowing space for personal pursuits I'd long deferred, simple things like reading uninterrupted or planning meals without budgeting for others' shortfalls. The absence of constant demands felt liberating, a reclaiming of time and energy previously siphoned away. I reflected on the email's theatrics, how it mirrored patterns of evasion rather than resolution, prioritizing narrative control over introspection. Daniel's words revealed a mindset entrenched in victimhood, where external factors always excused internal choices. Forwarding it to my parents had been instinctive, their affirmation reinforcing the collective boundary we'd established. Their refusal to step in echoed my own, creating a unified front against the cycle of dependency. Amanda's message, though brief, carried the familiar sting of guilt induction, but it no longer held power. Ignoring it marked progress, a deliberate choice to disengage from the emotional tug-of-war. With each passing hour, free from interruptions, a lightness settled in, my thoughts turning inward to future possibilities unburdened by familial obligations. The emergencies that once dominated my notifications had vanished, replaced by calm. I considered the broader implications of their approaches, how requests masked as necessities often conceal deeper avoidance of self-sufficiency. The email and text exemplified this, tools in a strategy to restore the status quo without change. My parents' confirmation via reply emails provided closure on that front, their words steady and supportive. Emphasizing personal responsibility is key to growth, it strengthened my resolve. Knowing the decision wasn't isolated, the disregard for Amanda's accusation allowed me to focus on healing. Recognizing the cruelty she referenced was a projection of their own tactics. The relief grew, manifesting in better sleep and clearer focus at work. Days without the weight of their issues highlighted how normalized the intrusions had become. my life now reclaiming its rhythm. The lightness wasn't euphoria but a steady peace, born from ending the drain. I pondered the economic excuses in Daniel's message. Valid in isolation but irrelevant when paired with ingratitude. It underscored the need for mutual effort in relationships, a lesson crystallizing through these events. The forwarded exchange with Linda and Thomas served as a record, their denials of aid a clear signal that the pattern was recognized beyond my perspective. It validated the shift, turning individual action into family consensus. Amanda's curt text lingered briefly in my mind before fading, its attempt at shaming ineffective against my newfound detachment. Ignoring it felt empowering, a step toward full autonomy. As the week progressed, the absence of emergencies became the new normal, my energy redirected to personal goals long sidelined. The feeling of lightness expanded. A quiet victory in reclaiming control. The manipulative elements in their communication stood out sharper now. Strategies I'd overlooked in the past but now identified clearly. This awareness fortified my boundaries, preventing future encroachments. My parents' stance, reiterated in their responses, provided a buffer, their commitment to non-interference aligning with my efforts to break the cycle. It fostered a sense of alliance, rare in our family history. The text from Amanda, though dismissed, prompted a final mental note on compassion's limits, where enabling hinders more than helps. The lightness persisted, a testament to the benefits of disengagement. With no further disruptions, my routine stabilized, allowing reflection on healthier dynamics ahead. The experience, though challenging, yielded growth, the silence a canvas for new beginnings. A month later, the quiet held steady. My phone no longer buzzed with frantic alerts or veiled pleas. The once constant stream of needs finally dried up. I embraced the stillness, redirecting energy toward my own life, unencumbered by the pull of others' demands. I booked a solo getaway to Florida, envisioning sun-soaked beaches and leisurely walks, a treat I'd postponed for years amid their frequent calls for help. The reservation felt like a declaration of independence, free from the nagging doubt that my spending should prioritize their gaps. Next, I invested in a quality winter coat, one I'd eyed but dismissed as extravagant, now purchasing without the familiar twinge of obligation. Reading sessions stretched longer, pages turning under lamplight, and hikes through local trails became regular. My steps lighter absent the mental tally of shared burdens. Occasional light check-ins with Sophia via text kept a thread open, her messages sharing school updates or casual thoughts. One day, she attached a digital drawing, a simple sketch with a note expressing regret for her earlier words, a gesture that touched me but didn't sway my stance. Without my support, Amanda and Daniel faced mounting pressures, their apartment rent falling behind in the competitive Texas market, culminating in an eviction notice that forced urgent scrambling. They turned to public assistance, applying for SNAP benefits to cover food essentials, navigating the paperwork and eligibility checks common in such situations. Daniel's part-time role slipped away under the strain, his performance affected by the accumulating stress, a common outcome in unstable households where financial woes compound daily challenges. The realities unfolded predictably, reflecting the consequences of prolonged reliance without adaptation. No bridges mended. I maintained the distance. Interactions minimal and surface level, ensuring the cut remained clean. The freedom expanded. My days structured around personal rhythms, no longer interrupted by their cycles of crisis. The journey taught essential truths. Mutual respect forms the bedrock of healthy ties, where one-sided giving erodes foundations. Establishing boundaries safeguards against exploitation, preserving individual well-being over endless accommodation, valuing self-care above imposed duties emerged as a core principle, a shift that prioritized inner balance and long-term sustainability. These lessons, hard-won through the ordeal, reshaped my view of kinship, emphasizing equity and autonomy. The peace deepened with time, my choices reflecting newfound priorities, from travel plans to simple indulgences. Sophia's occasional outreach remained a neutral link, her growth evident even from afar. Amanda's household adjustments highlighted systemic supports available in America, like food stamps and job search resources, steps they now pursued independently. Daniel's employment setback underscored the ripple effects of instability, prompting necessary changes. Without reconciliation efforts on either side, the separation solidified, allowing me to thrive in the space created. The experience affirmed that freedom often follows firm decisions, unapologetic in their necessity. Boundaries, once blurred, now stood clear, protecting against the drain of unbalanced relations. Self-care rose as the guiding value, overriding outdated notions of obligation that had held me captive. The narrative closed on this note of liberation, my life reordered around personal fulfillment, the lessons integrated into daily practice.